Raise your hands if you think it's gotten better. Okay. Raise your hands if you think your working conditions working in tech have gotten better recently. So okay, about the same. Worse. I mean, we can, come on, what is this? Let's raise them high. Okay, so that's exactly what it is that I want to address, where I think we all kind of see what's going on. And maybe this isn't universally true, but I think we are in a bit of and this is kind of in a great moment of stress for a lot of tech workers for whom the working conditions are changing at a rapid pace, largely attributed to claims right now of AI-enhanced productivity. Layoffs are a pretty regular occurrence. You can just turn on the news and you just hear another tech company doing layoffs. There's a lot of return to office mandates, tighter deadlines, decreasing salaries, a lot of top-down AI mandates, whether it makes sense for you to use it or not, accrual of power amongst tech oligarchs. And to be quite honest, I'm going to go make a really provocative statement, but I actually think us tech workers did this to ourselves, because it is the one place in the workplace is a place where we do accept authoritarianism. And so what are our options here? Before, when things weren't great, we just quit and found a new job, and that was awesome. Like, who here was like employed during the pandemic in tech? Awesome. You can just leave a job and then, people hit you up and then you get a new job. And as we all know, the market's a little cooked now, so it's a little bit harder to exercise that lever. So now we're left with two options. Either we suck it up, which a lot of people are dealing with, or we organize and do something about it. And that's where the Tech Workers Coalition kind of comes in, right? And some of you are wondering who we are. It's actually been an organization that's been around for over a decade. It actually started back in 2014 when a cafeteria worker at Google actually asked a Google software engineer, and they just started hanging out, and they wanted to act, and the cafeteria worker asked, we're about to go on strike. Can you walk out in solidarity with us? And a lot of software engineers did. It's illegal to do that in the US, so they were actually disciplined for doing that. Solidarity strikes are illegal, and they are illegal here in, someone more versed in Canadian labor law can tell me, but my understanding is that it's also pretty illegal here too. But on the surface, cafeteria worker, software engineer, couldn't be more different, but they did share something in common, is that they worked at Google together, and in that they found solidarity. And so with that, the Tech Workers Coalition was born with sort of really two big goals in mind, which is like, A, let's own the label tech workers. Obviously we all kind of came from this culture of startups and entrepreneurship, but ultimately we're workers. And then secondly, didn't really matter if you were a software engineer or a gig worker, customer success manager. If you are at a tech company generating value, you are a tech worker. So that's really kind of the ethos of what the Tech Worker Coalition is. And that sort of brings us to sort of like the Canadian chapter, which started, actually yesterday we celebrated our 1-year anniversary, but as I was saying, we define tech workers as all those employed by tech companies, software engineers, data labelers, gig workers. We intend for this to be a political home for tech workers, and with the idea that the tech industry must be changed by the people who work inside it. We really strive to have a solidarity network that really affirms the importance of just that psychological well-being and growth, and just learn and honestly just create connections. I'm sure we've all had that moment. Out of curiosity, raise your hand if you've sat through a company town hall, your CEO or COO said something and you're like, are we hearing this? Who here has had that moment? Who here has talked to their coworkers about it? Who here felt like they were doing something that they could get in trouble talking about it with their coworkers? That's right. That is kind of the reality of trying to change our working conditions. So I'm here to say that tech workers can win, and these are just two examples that I have recently, in Korea, and so it's not just North America. Samsung chip workers threatened to go on strike, and they got a $400,000 payout that they wouldn't have otherwise if they didn't threaten to strike. And then, of course, probably one of at least our fellow sister shops, which is Kickstarter United, the first kind of tech company that unionized, has a collective bargaining agreement. They actually went on strike for 42 days and won a 32-hour, 4-day work week. Under the argument being well, if AI is supposed to make us 10x more productive, give us some of our time back. And that was what they did. So that brings us to like Canada. Why Canada? What kind of got it started? There are a lot of chapters across the world. Obviously, New York City, the Bay Area. The London chap in the UK evolved, and they are actually now an official organizing arm of the Communication Workers Union there. Their probably biggest, most notable win that maybe some of you have seen in the news was the Google DeepMind, so actual AI research scientists going public. That was a win that, a solidarity network that has since evolved to be an official organizing arm of their Communication Workers Union have done. And then they used to be a Bangalore chapter. There's an Italy, Netherlands, so it's global, but then there wasn't a Canadian chapter. So last year, a couple of us had a bocce tournament, which was totally fake. It was actually during Toronto Tech Week, and a lot of us were feeling mischievous and being like, what if we just had like a thing about talking about unionizing tech at like a very investor-led kind of tech festival and founder-led festival. And so people showed up, and it was pretty clear that there was an appetite for this. So since then, we had a lot of socials because the ethos has to be we have to socialize before we organize. You want to know who you are working with and can I trust you before we actually do risky things together. Because anyone who's done a union drive, it is very risky. You can get fired for that. We've had a lot. We had a people's consultation on AI where we actually collaborate with Technologists for Democracy. So shout out to them. They have been great collaborators with us. We had a film screening of Union, which is the Amazon warehouse drive. So we had like a couple events, and we have a consistent book club. And really, in our year together, we kind of discovered that really the important thing is let's just get together to like make sure that we don't feel alone, because it can feel lonely. And actually, in a lot of cases, we have connected people who didn't know each other working at the same company who are realizing like, oh, I see something. Can we do something about it? Like Shopify employees or Thomson Reuters, which is a company headquartered in Toronto that does business with ICE, right? So a lot of what we do right now is like we have a group. So if you're interested, please come talk to me. That is very kind of like on the DL. We have a Luma calendar. We actually have upcoming trainings with CWA, so the Communication Workers of America Canada, which is on July the 12th. They have like a module to like just basically like here's how you have an organizing conversation. So there's like a little cohort that we're doing because organizing is a group activity. And that's really something that we really strive for. Some reflections on organizing that I kind of have as someone who is, rank and file, and I work actually at a civic tech company called Nava, which is unionized. We have about 400 people in our bargaining units and 100% remote. So that presents its own set of challenges. How do you run a union with people you've never met before in person? But really, I think things that we've kind of seen is that the state of tech worker organizing has really had its roots beyond bread and butter issues. People have actually organized around political issues, not material conditions. So a good example of that is like Google employees doing walkouts because of their Project Maven which was a military contract with the US Defense Department, which was successful. That was around the time when Google dropped their "Don't be evil" slogan, right? Microsoft actually last year dropping their contracts with the Israeli Defense Force, and that was the result of worker organizing. And that was not a material concern, that was like a political concern. And actually it was through these issue-based campaigns that actually translated into actually active union drives. Kickstarter United, probably like one of the most successful, or the New York Times Tech Guild, that started off, it feels quaint now, but at the time, the thing that actually drove and made their union, that actually got them to take action for the union drive was if anyone remembers the editorial from a US senator being like, send troops into cities, which feels quaint now because that's happening now. But that was kind of the start of the New York Times Tech Guild. And then Kickstarter, like their union formed because the CEO fired someone because they fired a trust and safety person who approved a project called like a comic book that was called like Always Punch Nazis. And the trust and safety person was like, clearly this is parody, we're not actually threatening. They had a lot of Fox News and Breitbart coverage over it. And the CEO fired the person who made the call being like, this does not violate our terms and conditions. And that was, so that was actually, it's material in the sense that someone got laid off for it, but it was really a freedom of speech issue that actually galvanized people to actually form their union at Kickstarter. There's a great podcast called The Oral History of Kickstarter United. So if you want to know like the really intricate details of what it's like to organize a union under an extremely like union busting environment. It's a great podcast. There's a lot of unresolved questions we need to think together. How do you organize remotely? How do you organize across borders? I see Adam here wearing his United Video Game Workers shirts. Shout out to video game workers, where the thesis is like video game workers work across the US and Canada. We got to organize together. And honestly, the biggest question is like, what is truly our leverage over automated systems we build? Like what does it mean to, like, for example, go on strike when you build all these systems that work without you? So I kind of close off there, where a lot of kind of things that at least I have been taught and trained in terms of like anytime you take a collective action. So out of curiosity, I'm actually kind of curious in this room, who here has taken what I'm going to call a collective action in the workplace? So example, who here has signed an open letter directed to management in their workplace? How did it feel? Just shout words.
It felt pretty good to kind of like, well, this is a different, it wasn't a tech job. Like, I mean, like, it was a crappy warehouse job and address like some of the stuff that we were dealing with. And it wasn't my idea. It wasn't my idea, but it was a friend of mine, and he got everybody together, and he kind of is, I guess you could say, he really got people like from the ground up to really get motivated to be like, you know, some of the stuff that we're dealing with is kind of crappy, and we could like fix it basically. And we were able to get our company to start to relook at our collective bargaining agreement. But this was already a unionized place, so I don't know.
Counts.
Yeah, it still counts.
I guess. Counts, and I love it.
But it was a grassroots thing. It was my friend. I remember when it started as an idea, then he was just talking about it with everyone else, and he really got everybody to do it until it really became a thing, and it literally made them like start look at our bargaining agreement like 2 years before it was supposed to be done, and we had a big referendum vote on something, and so it actually felt really good. It felt kind of cool to kind of see how that actually worked, and like how you can like the stuff that people like, you know, whisper, I guess, like, you know, like people actually do have feelings, and the whispers that you might hear in your company or whatever like that, like, you know, they can actually turn into something bigger. Okay, I'm getting the timer, but thank you for sharing your story. Right, thank you for sharing your story. Sharing salaries spreadsheets, anyone did that before, or sharing performance reviews? That's also a collective action. And out of curiosity, has anyone ever gone on strike? Hell yeah. And thank you for, okay, we have a couple of people who've been out on strike. So yeah, these are kind of the 4 questions we're always thinking about every time we do something together. How do we understand the power relationships in the tech industry or the workplace? How can we help each other overcome divisions to form groups, share a common goal? How can we overcome fear to take that collective action? Because it feels scary, but as your point, when you did it, it felt good. It felt awesome. And then how can we reflect on the changing balance of power? And that's ultimately what this is about. I know I'm at time, so happy to have some questions. I'm probably going to host a breakout group on this, so yeah. Thanks.
Anyone in person would like to ask a question?
I guess I'd say, like, what would you say are, like, I guess the common like issues that I guess people run into when they like first start, either if they join your organization or if they first try to start something on their own, or just like what are the first things that people really kind of run into, or like what advice would you give to those people?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer your question in like 2 ways. One is like, how do people kind of like discover us and like kind of issues that they have? Because ultimately, like, we're not like a union, like we're not CWA or like Unifor that like staffs and like trains people to like try to unionize. Like ultimately, we are a solidarity network. How people often discover us, and usually, so every Sunday, we run like a virtual weekly coffee just for people to drop in whenever they can, just to have that consistency. And usually when we ask us like, how did you discover us? Most people actually tell us being like, I was like looking around and I needed like a space to just like yell into the void over like, I don't know, AI, layoffs, or like I'm scared about getting laid off, or like one person said that they typed in ChatGPT and ChatGPT recommended us, which I think is kind of hilarious. But like, and then a lot of times I think the thing that people don't realize, like when people are like, is like, I think the idea of like, okay, we provided a safe space for like people to like share these concerns and feel heard and listened to, but like, how do we not give into like powerlessness, which I think is like the hardest thing. It's like, you know, like having no illusions but not being disillusioned, which is really challenging because we have a sense of, you know, I think work culture teaches us that we are powerless and we are helpless and that we do what the boss tells us to do. And if we're self-organized, like, you know, who here like has an agile or scrum way of working? Like, or software, like you use Jira or whatever, right? And you have like these rituals of like, you know, self-empowered teams, like through sprint planning and then the retro. And it's like kind of weird where people are like, oh, you know, this work could have been different. And like, to me, that feels like a place where we can have real talk about what worked or not, right? But that's not what happens. People are always being like, oh, you know, maybe I misestimated this ticket or whatever. This should have been a 3-pointer and I put it as a 1-point, whatever. Like that's a lot of like kind of those things. So getting people to kind of realize that like you can actually do something about it, which is hard. But part of doing something about it is like realizing that you're not the only one who thinks this way. There are probably other people, and the reason they don't express it is that they're scared. There's no reason. You're working remotely. We find a lot of the times who are kind of onboarding, a lot of people feel like, I feel like I'm the only one who thinks that. And then when people realize that you're actually not the only person, but that's because we are like so atomized in the way we work. We don't have that sense of solidarity, that there are actually people we work with that probably feel similarly. And for probably really good reason, they don't openly express it. I don't know if that answers your question.
I get it.
You mentioned the challenges in finding leverage when essentially we're building the systems that automate ourselves out of jobs. Do you have thoughts on what that leverage could be, or like?
I mean, this is like the million-dollar question in tech. I have to be candid with you. I don't think the tech, any chapter or any unionized shop, whether that's the New York Times Tech Guild or Kickstarter, who have actually been on strike, has really figured that question out. The New York Times Tech Guild, they went on strike around the time of the 2024 election when that happened, and well, the election ticker was still working, right? And then Kickstarter, they went on strike for 42 days, but they did a whole retro, and they said that every Kickstarter system was still working, even though they didn't touch a thing for 42 days. So I think that is like, I wish I had an answer for you. Yeah. I think that's something that, to your point, to kind of my point earlier about like something tech workers have to like, kind of almost have to like have a retreat on to like really figure what is really, because it's not like, I don't know, like what are like workers with a lot of like leverage, like TTC workers or flight attendants, like the Air Canada flight attendant. That's a good example. Flight attendants don't work, planes don't fly. Company loses a lot of money, a lot of leverage. Yeah. What is the equivalent of that for tech workers? To be honest, we don't know. And I think that's just something, and it's also just too new. We're too immature a movement.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, in your broad definition, I guess this includes cafeteria workers and so on. And, you know, the garbage piles up, there's no lunch and so on, and your product manager is 40 days behind on the roadmap. But the question I wanted to ask was about, a lot of this has been about unionizing existing workplaces. And a big part of the tech scene mythos is that you can found something and you can grow it to become the next Twitter and so on. Are you aware of anyone focusing on advocacy to convince potential founders to found worker-owned cooperatives instead of new venture-backed startups?
Yeah, I mean, I have to confess I'm not an expert on co-ops, and I feel like some members who are of Civic Tech, like I know they are involved with the Haifa co-op, might have a better answer than I would. I would love if like founders came in with like a came in that. Part of the reason that I'm coming from the union bent is because founders don't come in with that vision of like a worker-owned thing. So it's like up to, quite frankly, the employees to organize to like take a little bit of power back, which, you know, creates a little bit of like a division between like management and like, you know, the workers who work there. versus like it's a co-op where it's like we're all on the same team, we're all owners together.
Yeah, I think somebody probably needs to get that word out to them, because you've got, Y Combinator screaming at them, for decades now that this is the way, and, dangling this carrot of great riches. What was the one co-op that you mentioned? Haifa?
Like Haifa, which is based in Toronto, and I think like 1RG, which if I'm not mistaken is like a co-op, co-working space, if I'm not mistaken. Someone can keep me honest, but yeah. But yeah, there is a co-op in Toronto called Haifa.
Have you guys been doing outreach out to folks that are in the pipeline, like in university and training stage, and seeing like what their perceptions of are regarding unionization of IT?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So I wouldn't say we've had like explicit like outreach or like tabling or anything like that. However, one of our members does have a book club, and undergrad computer science students go to that book club, and I remember kind of being on a online book club, and this person was kind of saying how like, there is like such a strong push to like have AI native, computer science students that, and obviously and they were saying like, I don't see any entry level jobs. I'm struggling to find like internships and all that. Of course, N equals 2. I don't know how broadly shared this is. A lot of the people who find us are already kind of like employed or have had experience in tech. But would love to grow up. But ultimately, like Civic Tech, we're all volunteer run. So whoever wants to do that or has those kind of connections. One of our members though is like a postdoc here, and he lectures on computer like science and society, and had like and he was telling us that he has a lecture specifically on tech worker organizing. He said that one is probably his like most, like had the most attention and most, because the idea of, we don't have to take this as tech workers, we can actually organize and do something about it, is just something that people are just not presented with. So that's just some anecdotes.
Well, another round of applause for Andrew. Thank you.
I do want to make one quick announcement. So sometime in October, my friend Clarissa Redwine, who some of you, if you went to DXC, would have met, who tried to unionize Twitter when Elon Musk took it over, is writing a book called Against Tech Oligarchy, Worker Resistance, the World's Most Powerful Industry. It's not out yet. I just happen to have an advanced review copy, but she plans to make a Toronto pit stop sometime in October, I believe either October 8th or October 9th. That's at least the date she told me. But anyways, just want to put that out there. Against Tech Oligarchy, Worker Resistance in the World's Most Powerful Industry. By J.S. Tan and Clarissa Redwine. So these are two folks who got hired by Twitter to try to unionize it. Obviously that failed, but